This is your world news broadcast coming to you live from the capital, Algiers. To the headlines. Algeria reaffirms its call for respect of international law on Western Sahara, stressing unconditional talks for a lasting solution, while the Polisario Front insists a referendum on self-determination is the only fair path. Ceasefire on all fronts between Tehran and Washington. Ships pull back from the Strait of Hormuz. Washington indicates potential end to Iranian oil embargo, and Algeria welcomes the peace deal and calls for commitment. Also on news tonight, Sudan Army says it killed dozens of RSF fighters and destroyed their weapons. The UN warns more drone casualties. Algeria calls for a better crisis plan and no foreign meddling. And big Russian attack on Ukraine leaves dead and wounded. Kiev hits back, shelling Russia's Tula region. Zelensky calls for a decisive response, while Moscow blames Europe for blocking a settlement. Welcome back. First of on news tonight, on Monday morning, Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf received UN envoy Stéphane de Mistura in Algiers during a regional tour. Talks reviewed efforts to advance UN-led negotiations on Western Sahara between Morocco and the Polisario Front, with emphasis on a political solution in line with the UN Charter and the right to self-determination. Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf reaffirmed Algeria's support for the efforts of the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres and his personal envoy on Western Sahara. He stressed the importance of negotiations without preconditions and called for the right conditions to be created for direct talks between Morocco and the Polisario Front, with the aim of reaching a just, lasting and final solution to the conflict. Minister Ahmed Attaf affirmed the pivotal role of the United Nations mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, also known as MINURSO, in helping maintain stability in the region. He reiterated Algeria's firm position, calling for the respect of international resolutions on the Western Sahara issue, which it considers a decolonization question in line with the UN frameworks. Sahrawi President Brahim Ghali reaffirmed the Polisario Front's commitment to a self-determination referendum as the foundation for a just settlement to the conflict. He said the Sahrawi side remains open to discussing political options that do not compromise the right of the Sahrawi people to freely express their will in line with the UN-established legal framework for decolonization and self-determination.
The Western Sahara issue is not a border dispute or a passing political disagreement. It is the cause of a people who are still waiting for the completion of the decolonization process and for the exercise of the inalienable right to self-determination. The Polisario Front will remain committed to the path of peace based on international legitimacy. It is open to discussions on various political options, but without undermining the right of the Sahrawi people to freely express their will. A referendum cannot be excluded from any fair settlement, as it is the mechanism recognized by international law to resolve the decolonization issue.
Moving on to the Middle East-related news, the United States and Iran have announced an agreement to end hostilities after months of indirect talks and conflict. The deal includes understandings to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and ease restrictions on Iranian ports. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif said the agreement has been reached, with a signing ceremony expected Friday in Switzerland, though questions remain over provisions linked to Lebanon. U.S. President Donald Trump, for his part, confirmed the deal, saying the Strait of Hormuz would reopen immediately and without fees. Iran's deputy foreign minister said the final text of what he called the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding is ready for signing in Geneva.
The Islamic Republic of Iran remains committed to diplomacy and dialogue as the most effective path toward de-escalation and achieving sustainable security. Recent diplomatic effort held here in Geneva, and which will continue on Thursday, indicates a new window of opportunity for negotiations to address differences and build trust, provided they are based on mutual respect, fair treatment, and the non-selective application of international standards. The text of the memorandum includes an immediate and permanent end to the war and to military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon.
Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif described the Iran-US agreement on Monday as a historic step toward peace. Speaking before the Pakistani parliament, he said the deal comes like the sun of peace after the darkness of war, marking what he called a turning point after months of conflict and negotiations.
By the infinite grace and mercy of Allah Almighty, today the world has crossed a historic milestone of peace. After the dark night of war, the sun of peace has risen. Thank God. And after 30 months and 16 days of immense tests, thank God Iran and the United States have announced an immediate and permanent end to military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon.
Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai said on Monday that mistrust between Tehran and Washington remains deep, despite a preliminary agreement. He stressed the U.S. still has work to do to gain Iranian trust, warning that any breach of commitments would be met with a reciprocal response. On the Strait of Hormuz, he said Iran would ensure safe passage with regional coordination, while reaffirming its sovereignty and plans to charge service fees.
It must be acknowledged, unfortunately, that the deep mistrust Iran holds toward the United States stems from a long history of wrongful actions committed by American leaders against the Iranian people, a history dating back to 1953 and even earlier in some account continuing to the present day. This profound level of mistrust exists between the Iranian people and the US government, and it will take a long time before the United States can earn the trust of the Iranian people. Therefore, what has occurred is only a step toward reducing tensions and ending a war that harmed our region, caused significant losses for the Iranian people, and also resulted in major losses and a defeat for those who initiated the aggression. The release of frozen Iranian assets, along with compensation for damages, are two key points. The American side has committed to taking steps in these two areas. The United States must fulfill its obligations, commitments that are based on this agreement, which it has itself approved.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said Monday the draft memorandum of understanding between Tehran and Washington is the result of months of dialogue and follow-up. He said full implementation could ease many domestic and regional challenges and create new conditions in Iran and the Middle East. According to the Iranian news agency IRNA, he added that about 90% of the Supreme National Security Council supported the process after extensive discussions and review.
We held extensive discussions on this issue, examining the various viewpoints and differing assessments surrounding it. We debated the matter at length, taking into account the crisis and challenges facing the world, as well as those confronting different countries and our own region of the Middle East. As a country located in the Middle East, we believe these negotiations are not only a source of pride for the Iranian people, but also a significant achievement for the region and for the forces of resistance.
President Donald Trump announced Monday the Strait of Hormuz will be fully open next Friday with no transit fees. Speaking in Evian with French President ahead of the G7 summit, Trump said Washington wants to end the conflict in Lebanon. He believes a solution could be reached during the summit, but gave no further details. U.S. War Secretary Pete Hegseth said Iran could resume oil exports immediately after a formal agreement with the United States. In an interview with CBS News, he said Iran could start selling oil as soon as the deal is signed and sanctions are lifted.
Ultimately, the blockade will stay as the strait opens, and then the blockade will open, and then the straits open, and if that takes 30 days to fully mature or 2 weeks to fully mature, but it will start immediately, as the president has said.
Following the announcement of the peace deal between Washington and Tehran, international reactions poured in, welcoming the breakthrough. Maro Balur has more in this report.
After months of a conflict that plunged the Middle East into instability and sent shockwaves through global energy markets, Tehran and Washington have finally reached an initial deal that would extend their shaky ceasefire and lead to the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Shortly after arriving in France for the G7 summit, US President Donald Trump announced that the Memorandum of Understanding has already been signed and the strait is already partially opened, with the official signing ceremony set to be held on Friday in Geneva. Algeria on Monday welcomed the agreement, expressing hope that it will serve as a foundation for strengthening trust among the parties concerned.
Algeria welcomes the achievement of framework agreement between the United States of America and Islamic Republic of Iran, under which military operations in the Gulf region and the Middle East will cease. On this occasion, Algeria expresses its sincere appreciation for the international mediation efforts, particularly those undertaken by Pakistan and Qatar, and emphasizes the importance of all parties adhering to the agreed understandings.
From Europe to China, the agreement was met with particular relief as it restores maritime shipping through the Strait of Hormuz after months of turmoil that unsettled global energy markets.
The deal that has been announced now by US and Iran that is much welcomed by everybody. It is the first phase to open the Strait of Hormuz and then move on to the negotiations on the critical topics like the nuclear issue, but also other critical issues that are important for the stability and peace in the region.
China welcomes the agreement reached by the United States and Iran on the content of the first phase Memorandum of Understanding and appreciates Pakistan's mediation effort. The Strait of Hormuz is an important waterway for international navigation. Restoring stability in the strait serves the shared interest of the countries in the region and the international community.
The UN, moreover, called for an immediate end to hostilities and the withdrawal of Zionist occupation forces from the Lebanese territory.
I welcome the announcement that the United States and Iran have agreed on a peace deal that provides for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and a framework for further negotiations. I call for an immediate end to hostilities, the withdrawal of Israel from Lebanese territory.
Eyes are now focused not only on Friday's ceremony, but also on the subsequent 60-day round of negotiations, which will address the most contentious issues, including Iran's nuclear program, and ultimately determine the future of the entire region.
Still with the Middle East developments, 5 Palestinians were killed and others wounded on Monday in occupation airstrikes across Gaza Strip. Medical sources said a woman and a child were killed west of As-Suwaida and Deir al-Balah after drone fire, while another was killed in a tense strike in Nusayrat refugee camp. In Gaza City, a nurse and his child were also killed in Sheikh Radwan, with several others wounded. The Gaza Government Media Office said 3,269 casualties were recorded, including 992 killed and 3,138 wounded, over 245 days of ceasefire violations. It also reported 95 arrests, more than 52,748 trucks blocked, and around 12,755 patients denied medical evacuation. Moving on to the war in Sudan, the Sudanese army said it destroyed weapons and ammunition depots, 141 rapid support forces combat vehicles, and killed dozens of RSF members since the start of June. In a statement posted on Sunday, the army said operations covered multiple fronts. In Darfur, it said 29 vehicles, ammunition stores, military equipment, and a fuel depot in Yala were destroyed. In Kordofan, it reported the destruction of 91 vehicles and further losses in personnel. In the White Nile axis, it said a strategic drone was shot down over Kinana and 21 vehicles were destroyed, with additional losses in equipment and fighters. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk on Monday condemned the sharp rise in drone use in Sudan's war. Speaking before the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, he said more than 1,000 civilians were killed in the first 5 months of the year, as drones became a central feature of the conflict.
Mr. President, in Sudan, the horrific conflict has expanded and escalated, marked by a sharp increase in the use of drone warfare. Between January and May 26, our office documented more than 1,000 civilians killed by drone strikes. Rape and sexual violence are rampant.
Algeria, for its part, on Monday reiterated its rejection of any foreign interference in Sudan's internal affairs, reaffirming support for the country's sovereignty and unity. During an interactive dialogue with the UN Independent Fact-Finding Mission on Sudan in Geneva, Algeria's ambassador Idriss Latrash called for stronger coordinated efforts to address what he described as the world's worst humanitarian crisis.
The Sudanese crisis has become the worst humanitarian crisis in the world in terms of all the figures that summarize the suffering of the brotherly Sudanese people. Secondly, the Sudanese crisis has become the epicenter of foreign interventions that have contributed to fueling this conflict, feeding its various parties and prolonging its duration. Thirdly and finally, despite all the efforts undertaken at the UN and African levels, the prospect of the desired and necessary political solution to the crisis remains beyond the reach of all international and regional actors. Therefore, Mr. President, I would like to emphasize here Algeria's position in support of the unity of Sudan, its land, people, and institutions, and Algeria's position rejecting foreign interference in all their forms in Sudan's internal affairs, as well as Algeria's position calling for intensifying and mobilizing effort in order to best address this escalating crisis on all fronts and levels.
The Algerian Minister of State and Minister of Hydrocarbons Mohamed Arqab reaffirmed the country's commitment to strengthening strategic partnerships across Africa during a video conference with Angola's Minister Diamantino Azevedo. He stressed cooperation on building an integrated African economy based on sustainable development, energy access for all, Agenda 2063, and South-South cooperation. Minister Arqab also called for expanding Algerian-Angolan cooperation into new areas to further deepen the strategic partnership. The Algerian Water Desalination Company, a Sonatrach subsidiary, signed 3 cooperation agreements with national environmental and academic institutions, including Qasdi Marbah University in Ouargla province. The Ministry of Hydrocarbons said the deals aim to strengthen coordination between economic and research bodies, support innovation, promote sustainable development, and enhance water security.
أود أن أشير إلى أن الجزائر تمكنت من تحقيق قفزة نوعية في مجال تحلية المياه البحر.
I would like to point out that Algeria has succeeded in achieving a qualitative leap in the field of seawater desalination. This technology has become a fundamental pillar of the drinking water supply system, helping to meet citizens' needs and support the country's economic and social development. The agreements we are signing today are intended to establish a comprehensive institutional framework that will enable the pooling of national expertise and competencies, as well as the unification of scientific, technical, and research efforts aimed at developing innovative and sustainable solutions in the field of water and the environment.
Looking Eastern Europe now, Ukrainian authorities said on Monday that at least 9 people were killed in Russian airstrikes, including attacks on Kiev. Officials reported Russian shelling across nearly all districts of the capital, killing at least 4 people and injuring more than 20 others. Ukraine's interior minister also said 5 rescue workers were killed and repeated strikes on Kharkiv in the northeast. Russian local authorities said at least 3 people were killed in a Ukrainian drone attack in the southern Tula region. Governor Dmitry Milayev said the strike about 200 kilometers south of Moscow also injured 3 people, including a 1-year-old child. Following Monday's strikes, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged the G7 leaders in France to increase pressure on Moscow and strengthen Ukraine's air defenses.
It is very important that a response be issued by the G7 countries, which are now meeting at their summit, and that this response be decisive and tangible by increasing pressure on the aggressor and strengthening support for Ukrainian air defenses.
Russia's foreign minister, for his part, said Europe cannot contribute to a Ukrainian settlement. He accused the European Union of obstructing efforts to reach what he called the just solution to the crisis.
Europeans in the current situation are mistakenly concluding that Russia is currently losing and Ukraine is winning, so they can issue ultimatums in the hopes that Russia will comply. President Putin has already spoken about this in his recent speeches at various events. These calculations, of course, are completely misguided and illusory. as was confirmed during the visit of 3 ambassadors from Britain, France, and Germany to our ministry. My deputy spoke with them. They brought nothing new, but they are persistently trying to offer their services, clearly not wanting to be left out of the process.
Ahead of Algeria's World Cup opener against Argentina, Algerian fans created a vibrant atmosphere in Kansas City. Supporters, including members of the Algerian diaspora across the United States, gathered from several cities and expressed optimism that the Algerian football team could secure a strong start. Safin Kadura has the story.
Here in Kansas City, something special is unfolding. A unique story of devotion is being written by Algerian supporters as the countdown begins in earnest to the Desert Warriors' 5th World Cup appearance and their first since Brazil 2014. From every direction, waves of Algerian fans continue to arrive. Hundreds, even thousands, have made the journey carrying Algeria in their hearts. Each supporter brings with them a message from home, driven by a sense of belonging that transcends distance and proves that love for Algeria knows no borders. From the very first days of the tournament, Algerian fans have stood out among supporters of other nations. Their chants echo throughout the city, national flags fill the streets, and their vibrant presence has given Kansas City a distinctly Algerian atmosphere unlike any other World Cup host city.
Viva Algerie, let's go.
1, 2, 3, Viva l'Algérie!
Viva Algerie!
Amid this extraordinary display of pride and passion, Vladimir Petkovic's men draw valuable motivation from the unwavering support for their fans, led by Captain Riyad Mahrez. The Greens are determined to restore Algerian football to its rightful place on the world stage. The challenge begins with a daunting opening fixture against reigning world champions Argentina, yet the Desert Warriors are counting on the fighting spirit that has long defined Algerian football and enabled it to rise to the occasion against the game's biggest powers. The clash with the Albi Celeste is more than just an opening match. It is an appointment with history, a World Cup showdown set to capture global attention between the defending champions and an Algerian side eager to prove it belongs among football's elite. Drawing inspiration from the memories of Gijón 1982 and the unforgettable battles that have shaped the nation's football legacy.
And that's all for tonight. Thank you for watching. See you next time.